Welcome back, everybody, to the garage. In this episode, James and I are going to be discussing what gives someone their self-worth. I'm Josiah.
And I'm James.
And this is the garage. So, self-worth, right? That's kind of a tough one. There are a lot of variables. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of, I guess, how you're brought up, right? And the reason I say that is because the very first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to self-worth is religion. A lot of people, I don't know specifics, but a lot of people just like to find their self-worth off of how well they follow their own religion. Whether they're being like a good religious guy or, they're not following their religious to the T, and then they beat themselves up about it, or, they ask for forgiveness or something along those lines. And then, like, your self-worth is just based off of whatever book or whatever practices that religion follows. Does it make sense?
Kind of, but I don't think I would necessarily agree with that. Just mainly, I could see that maybe some people would probably define their self-worth based off of religion, but I don't think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people define their self-worth based off of whether outside factors, whether it's internal or external. You know what I mean?
You said it's either internal or external?
Yeah, it could be both, depending on how the person looks at it. And I think one thing to really look at is the individual itself. Because I've got a couple of ideas in my head as to what people really look at when it comes to self-worth. So the first one I think is you define your self-worth by the way you see yourself. The second one would be how other people define you, and therefore that is your reality. Those are just some of the two that I could think of right now, because one is obviously internal, right? And the second one is external, because not a lot of people will necessarily think they themselves are worthy because they might be insecure.
So when you say that, though, and you say internal, the only thing that I can think of is in my head, right? I don't believe that there's any internal, only because whatever struggle someone is having within innerly, right? Because a perfect example would be like today's day and age, right? It's looked at as being good to have like abs and be slim and muscular, right? But back when the Romans were, of power, the better look was to look almost gluttonous because it showed that you had wealth.
Okay. So
any way that we look at ourselves today can only be shaped by external purposes. Unless there's this very inward morality that everybody has and everybody has had since the dawn of time, which kind of goes into something that I've been thinking about recently. It's all about intention. What I mean by that is when somebody kills somebody, right?
Yeah.
I always reference the Spartans, how they used to throw babies over the cliff. They never looked at that as something that was adherently evil. They thought that it was just them doing what they needed to do in order to be the best. And they didn't think of it as good or bad, or, actually thought of it as something that was good. And if I'm speaking specifically on internal, external, I have to go in and say there has to be some sort of morale, or not morale, but...
morality?
Yeah, morality. There has to be some sort of morality that lingers within all of us, and I think that is within intention.
Now, I'm going to say that I think a lot of people can find self-worth within themselves if they really try hard enough and they really stop and think about themselves. And I think by doing so, you'll be much more at peace than if you were to find self-worth externally. Because if you're trying to find self-worth externally, it's kind of like you're defining your self-worth based off of other people's opinions and, like what you said, outside variables, which is based off of society or whatever it is, right? Now, you could have like the weirdest or the most obnoxious attributes, but like if you're extremely comfortable with yourself and if you accept yourself for who you are and you're extremely okay with that and like nobody else can like shape you or change you for whatever reason, then I think your self-worth is that much greater. Does that make sense? I think you'll find much more satisfaction if you accept yourself for who you are. Does that make sense?
It does, but the only issue that I have with that is whenever you're looking inwardly and you're trying to accept you for you, there has to be a measurement of good and bad. You know, you have to be able to say, I like myself for these reasons. Whether you are looking at a father and he's saying, oh, I'm a good father. But what defines him as a good father? Social construct, right? Stuff that externally has been programmed into his brain to say, this is what is good. So anytime you're looking inwardly, yes, but you're only doing that off of a measurement that has been created for you.
I might agree with you just a little bit because I would agree that, for example, like say some parents out there, right? They might think that by doing this for their kids makes them a good parent. But in reality, it might not. And let me provide you with an example. So a lot of kids nowadays, I know, have cell phones, right? iPads. And I know I have had a nephew. He's quite grown up now, but he was like 3 years old and he know all the buttons and on an iPhone and just know how to pull up YouTube and just watch videos on his own. You know what I mean? But that's not necessarily good for the kid because then in a way it's, in my opinion, it's making them more dependent on technology at that point. Do you know what I mean? But if a parent sees that, hey, you know what? We shouldn't be getting kids cell phones at a very young age or let them be dependent or using cell phones or technology as much. We want them to be able to think for themselves. We want them to explore the outside world rather than staying inside. Then that's what the parents would want the kids to do, right?
In some cases.
Yeah. So I think the parents that are more aware of what they want for their kids, they might say, no technology, even though everybody else is doing it. You're going to learn my way because that's what I believe in. And in a way, that's kind of their, I don't know if it's self-worth, but it's like it could be self-worth. It's self-values, it's their personal values and their personal views. Whereas the other parents obviously are, you know what? I love my kid. I'm going to give them whatever they want. And it'll spoil them in the long run. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. But then again, I'm going off of the philosophy. I forgot who it was by. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not going to say a name, but the philosophy is there's no good or bad. There's no adherent good or evil in individuals. People are just people and they go based off of what has been created around them. So with that being said, I have two things on what you said, which the first thing was the philosophy where there's no adherent good or evil in the world. Mm-hmm. There's just people. And the only reason we view them good or evil is because something that was created socially. So the social dynamic says, okay, this is good, this is bad. And that has changed throughout time so many times that if you look over, not only at the Spartans, I always reference the Spartans, but if we go to the Roman Colosseum where they were slaughtering people in Roman times, they were throwing the prisoners out to, if we look back at America, beginning of America, we had slavery. There's just been Germany and with the Holocaust, right? There have been so many instances of change within our culture, within our dynamic, within us as a human species. It becomes very hard to distinguish good from bad. So that's why I keep on the premise that there is the only way that we can have our self-worth is based on what is created around us at that time. My second point, going off what you were saying with, kids and technology. So there have been so many different changes within our culture as a human species. So with your statement saying that these kids with their cell phones, my second point being, in a world where technology is always developing, that is where our future is heading. I don't necessarily think that it is the parents' fault. I think that there is a fine line between, like what you said, kind of spoiling the kid, but it is within our DNA to adapt. That's just what we do. And so with technology advancing as fast as it is, I think it's very hard to even shelter kids from that in the first place. So that kind of what we're talking about, I guess, is finding that medium. So if kids have this technology available to them at a young age, right? You were talking about your nephew who knew the phones of the buttons on a phone and how to work YouTube at a very young age. I think those kids are going to be actually more prepared for the future just because that's where it's heading. You know what I mean? You almost need to know this kind of stuff now. Not just to fit in with society, but, and I think I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm not saying that I'm okay with it. But for social purposes, for that fitting in, even though I'm not saying to fit in or not fit in, I never really fit in as a kid. But to fit in, you have to kind of adapt with the change, adapt with the time. I think that's why why the Democratic Party is so popular, because they're very, let's go with the times. Again, it has to be that fine line, that middle ground of like, okay, what is the right amount of technology available to a kid at a certain age or not?
I can see a little bit of it, but I probably wouldn't agree with it. Just mainly because if, say, a kid needs to, say, text message, they can just use the phone to text message, right? What I mean by that is they could literally just get like one of those QWERTY keyboard phones, right? To start out as. If I remember correctly, Ben Shapiro does not let his kids have smartphones. And I think they're like 13 or something. Like one of them's like 13 or something. He said like at that age, I'm not going to let my kids have smartphones because then at that age, they're susceptible to bad content such as pornography, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, they might be way too dependent on cell phones, in my opinion.
I think what he said exactly is that he doesn't allow them to have social media. I think he said that he allows them to have phones, but they monitor it to the point where they can like not allow them to do that. And it's not hard to do. I could do it to anybody in the house that's connected to my Wi-Fi. It's it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. But with all that being said, my entire point I'm trying to drive forward is that our self-worth isn't really determined by looking inward. I personally don't know of any example that you could possibly give me to where I could go look in the mirror right now, come to a conclusive thought, and then think on that thought and say, this has nothing to do with the outside world whatsoever.
I would still disagree with it, man.
Well, if you could, can you paint me an example of such a circumstance where you go in the mirror and you look at yourself and you say, I like this about me, I like this about me, I like this about me, I don't like this about me, I don't like this about me, and I don't like this about me. And then tell me why you don't like those things and how they do not tie whatsoever into what other people might think.
The first thing I want to point out is the good and evil that you're talking about, right? And what I want to bring up with that is, in a way, there is no good and evil. It's only based off of what society paints it, right? Because, like what you said a while ago, slavery back then was considered normal. It was not considered evil. But then after a while, things start to change, and then the society shapes what good is and what evil is. And I think it's like that with a lot of cultures, a lot of whatever it is. And I suppose it's somewhat external. Actually, I'll put it like this. I think a lot of it is external, but then you have to use those externals and then correlate it with your internal. And what I mean by that is, for example, say you're like an Instagram model, right? An Instagram model, you have to look good. You get those self-worth You get that self-worth, you get that satisfaction by people liking your photos, you get that satisfaction from people commenting and telling you how good you look. But then if that stops, then are you still happy with yourself? Are you still feeling worthy in that sense? Now, I think that if you understand yourself a lot better to the point where, hey, you know what? If all of these people went away and I'm still with myself and I'm looking at myself and I'm telling myself, hey, I'm honestly good the way I am. I feel great. I'm happy. I eat healthy. I work out. Then honestly, like, do you really need the satisfaction and the compliments from external people? You know what I'm saying? External factors? Probably not. But if you're really comfortable with yourself, you're gonna say that you know what, I'm happy with the way I am. But if I'm not happy with the way I am, I can work to make myself happy the way I am. So what do you think?
So when it comes to being happy, you use an example of like a model or an Instagram model. The very first thing that comes to my mind was the actor, comedian, stand-up comedian. He was Genie from Aladdin. Robin Williams.
Okay.
So Robin Williams, right? Everyone thought he was the happiest guy alive. Ended up committing suicide. Tragic. So everyone thought like, okay, Robin Williams has literally everything. Why is he still unhappy? Why was he so unhappy that he had to take his own life? And going based off of kind of what you were talking about with the whole model thing is that I still would have to say that it was probably some heartaches he's went through that just kind of haunted him. And he couldn't move past them. Maybe it was love, maybe it was death of a family member, maybe it was just depression, anxiety. But I think all of those things stem back to external factors, right? If we're looking at what love is and how people kill themselves because they're lovesick, right? Their self-worth is completely gone because they put it in somebody else. But why do they put it in someone else in the first place? Because we're in a society where we're brought up to find love. That's like the American dream, quote unquote. Get married, get a good job, get a dog, 2 cars. That's the American dream, right? And I mean, it's painted in movies, it's plastered all over the media. That is the ideal. So again, that goes back to the culture. That's what I'm trying to say. I think any kind of picture you could paint could be linked directly back to external factors. So when we're talking about the whole self-worth thing, like I said, I've said it a few times already, I just think that firmly and undoubtedly, in my opinion, that whatever construct, whatever thought process we have can all be dwindled back to external factors, whether it be the reason you want to be super wealthy, external factors. It's not because you were born and then you said, holy crap, I want to be super rich one day. There's a drive behind it. Or bodybuilders, I want to be super ripped. There has to be a drive behind it. That's why people are motivated to do things. And the only reason people are motivated to do things is because something inside them is telling them to do it. But where did that voice come from in the first place? And you look back at all these other different civilizations all throughout time, and there was always something driving. It has to be whatever that culture is promoting at that time. Whether it be you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I'm fat. Well, why are you beating yourself up because you're fat? Oh, because society tells me I shouldn't be fat. Or, oh man, my girlfriend dumped me. I must be a worthless piece of crap. Well, why did you want to love in the first place? Why did you feel the need to find your quote-unquote soulmate? Oh, because my society pretty much told me that I needed to do that. It's the same concept of saying that there's in all logic, there's emotion. And but not in all emotion, there's logic. We agreed on that premise a while ago. There's nothing that anybody does that's not emotionally driven. To some level of degree. There, at some point, it has to be related back to the emotion. I think it is the same thing to be said for the self-worth. I think whatever way you look at yourself, no matter what, we are hardwired because we were brought up in today's culture, in today's society, to believe there are good and there's bad. You're just pulling things out of midair and then believing it, and that's what you're basing your reality off of. But I don't even know if that's possible. Everything we think is because what we've learned up until this point.
I would agree with that last statement, that a lot of things that we learn or a lot of things that we do comes from our background.
It has to.
Yes, but I do not agree that your self-worth should be defined by external factors. But I do understand where you're coming from, though. I do understand that a lot of people do define their self-worth based off of external factors. And I'll talk about some of your examples. So, Robin Williams. Honestly, I don't know what happened to him, if he was going through some mental disorder, depression, whatever it was, and he took his own life. It's a shame. So I can't really use that example. The second one you brought up was the American dream. To get married, have kids, cars, regular house. I'm telling you right now, if I were in that position, I would be damn miserable. Because I do not want to be like anybody else. And on top of that, I hate kids. Sorry guys, I hate kids. They cry too much, they poop too much, they're annoying little shits. But I'm sorry, it is what it is. And another one you brought up was bodybuilders, right? Yes, outside factors may have made them want to look ripped, shredded and whatnot, but it's based off of what they want to do. And I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this example, right? If, say I'm like extremely overweight and I'm not happy with myself, but I know that I want to change and I want to work out, eat healthier, and get in better shape. Now, right there, it's your own goal and your own challenges, and you're driving that own want for yourself, right? It may be because some external factors of how people look at you, but I think if you find it within yourself to understand that, you know what, I'm doing this for me, it's only for me, and I'm gonna get there. It's my self-worth, right? It's you defining yourself, and that gives you that self-worth from within yourself, instead of other people trying to drive you to do it. That would be other people giving you your worth, right? And I think that if you're working out, you're eating healthy, and you're feeling happy, and you're working towards that goal that you want, then you're already worthy in your own way, because you're doing what you want. Does that make sense?
Yes, but my question would then be, why would you want that in the first place?
Why do people want to be musicians or painters? Because it's a passion of theirs, right? And if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think musicians, artists are essential to everyday life. But it's a passion that they want, right? It's a passion that they want to do, and if they love doing it, then go do it. Just like working out or bodybuilding or getting into a better shape. You know what? I'm feeling so crappy about myself. I just want to start feeling better. I'm tired of waking up and feeling drowsy because of the crap that I eat. Then, you know what? I want to make a change. And people do. And they don't let anything stop them. You know? That's what I mean.
I think that last statement I heavily disagree with, because I can't count how many times on one hand or both hands, how many times I've decided, oh, I'm going to do this, and then not do it. I think the statistic is like less than 1% of Americans keep their New Year's resolution. So I think that premise of when people say they're going to do something, nothing gets in their way, I don't believe that. I think we're very self-defeating as a humanity species right now. But other than that, going back to what you were saying about how you have artists and you have musicians, and how you don't necessarily think that they are essential, right? And so why do they paint? Why do they write music? Because it's what makes them feel good. However, how would making oneself feel good bring somebody like that self-worth? Just because you feel good doesn't necessarily mean that you're earning self-worth. If I go smoke a whole bunch of weed, I feel good, right? But then you look in the mirror the next day and you're like, oh, I didn't do anything yesterday because all I did was smoke pot all day. So you can't really correlate having the feeling of feeling good to self-worth. I think those are two different things.
I still think that we can't. So the first one that you brought up was New Year's resolution. I'll tell you what, some of these people, they have these New Year's resolution, but they don't plan it ahead of time. It's like, you know what? It's like December 31st. Oh, you know what? I'm going to run every single day for, next year, but they have no plan. They have no plan whatsoever. And then when New Year hits, they run for about like, say, a week. And they quit because they, for one, didn't initially want it right from the bottom of their heart. And two, it might be too difficult and they might just quit. But if somebody genuinely wants something, and I mean genuine, right? Then they'll go for it. But if there's someone that says that, hey, you know what? I want this, but they put no thought into it, they put no plan into action, then of course they're going to fail because they didn't plan and they honestly didn't really think about it hard enough, right? And the second thing that you talked about was, why do people want to do something, right? Musicians and artists. And your second one was, if somebody were to pursue music or painting or whatever it is that they want, and if they're happy with it, you brought up the example of smoking weed and feeling happy at the same time, right? But I think your examples may be a little too opposite, because one is more immediate and the other one is more long term, and it's something that somebody has thought out for a longer period of time. Because if somebody wants to pursue their passion, they're going to put effort into it consistently. Whereas smoking or eating, say, cheeseburger or Sunday ice cream, of course that stuff's going to make you feel good, but it's not necessarily giving you that self-worth. It's just that instant gratification. I think the good that we're talking about is different, because one is instant, it's self-gratification, not self-gratification, but it's
instant.
Yeah, instant gratification. And the other one is working towards a long-term goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would have to ask you, are those the same chemicals that are released? So whenever, let's say I want to go eat a cheeseburger right now, I have a large amount of serotonin and dopamine that's released from my brain. Are those the same chemicals that you feel whenever you reach a goal?
You might, yeah.
No, I mean, it is. There are only X amount of chemicals in the brain. So whether it is instant or whether it is a long-term goal, you're still having the same chemicals released in the brain. The only difference is that we've put a meaning behind the long-term goal. So whenever we earn our long-term goal, it means more. But it still does not deter from the fact that they're the exact same chemicals being released. The happiness feeling, dopamine, serotonin.
I think you're a little bit far away from what I'm trying to paint. People feel good all the time. People feel bad all the time. But it doesn't mean that it is exactly what it is. People work out and they go through pain all the time. It sucks. But it's a good thing afterwards once they accomplish it. I think the difference between your two examples is one is goal-oriented and the other one is not. Yes, they may be releasing serotonin and dopamine and may make the person feel good, but it doesn't mean that it's equally the same. One is more, again, goal-oriented, and it's more structured, and it's more, yes, it's long-term, and it's something that I've been working for, and it's legitimate to them, but the other one is just food. Does it make sense?
I see what you're saying, but you kind of just proved my point, which is, why do people feel bad they don't have that gratification feeling once they go eat a cheeseburger from McDonald's.
What do you mean?
So yours is saying you're setting a goal for yourself, you're going out and achieving it, and it's a kind of a different feeling, right? It's more of a gratifying, it's more of a fulfillment feeling, right? The only reason why we have this built up in our brain, again, is because of external factors. It's only external factors. If we look back to the Romans, whenever you were fat, you were looked at as wealthy. So what did they strive for? To eat more food. It was to eat more food because then they're wealthy. Then they are looked at as being acceptable to society. And that's something that we all do regardless and subconscious. We all want to be accepted. That is something that runs deep within every single one of us. We want acceptance to the tribe. That is something that runs within every single human being. So why does somebody feel bad when they go out to McDonald's to eat a cheeseburger and then they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, oh man, well, I'm not really looking good. I probably shouldn't have done that. External factors. Why is it that someone is like, you know what? F that. I want to go get in really good shape. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to work out every day. And even if they're so goal-oriented, they're so driven, they go and do that, they go and achieve it, and then boom, they have this feeling. The only reason why they really want it in the first place is because society said, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what makes you acceptable. Because back then, again, we go back to society, back in the Roman era, it was acceptable to be fat. That is what was acceptable by the tribe. So that was what was sought after. The reason it was sought after was because the tribe demanded it. It's the same thing nowadays. And I know that's kind of a hard concept to grasp because everyone wants to believe, oh, I'm in control of myself. I do it for myself. But no, that's not really the reality of anything. It's the same hard-hitting fact that there's no adherent good or evil. Nothing we do necessarily is of our own, ironic here, free will.
I've come to the conclusion that we're not on the same page.
Oh my God. How?
Because you're talking about the value in the things that people want to do because of what society makes people want to do. But I'm talking about people doing what they want to do because it makes them feel good and they're happy with themselves, not because of external factors. So we're not really on the same page.
I completely understand where you are coming from. I do. And this is one of those things, maybe I'm just not elaborating it in a good enough way. But what I'm hearing from you, right? But what the entire conversation is based off of was self-worth. Yes. Where do people get their self-worth? That's the title of the episode. Where do people get their self-worth? My direct answer is society.
Correction. The question to this is, how do people define their own self-worth?
Okay. So how do people define their own self-worth? Again, direct answer, society.
You still think it's society?
I'm 100%, 1,000% convinced it is society. Anything that anybody works for, right, has something to do with what we went through. And what do we go through? Our society. Everyone, like I said, I understand exactly what you're saying. You're saying that I want to look this way because it makes me feel good. I understand what you're saying. And so people say, well, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to achieve that. That way I can feel good within myself. My premise is that does not exist.
I still disagree with that. And let me try to repaint this for you and our listeners out there, okay? Yes, there are external variables that shape you to thinking and doing certain things and there are external things that shape you and make you think a certain way. However, it doesn't mean that you have to listen to everything out there. Say you pick, oh, I like this about this person. Oh, I like this about this person. Oh, you know what? I don't like that guy. I don't want this trait. So you're adding all of these traits to make yourself you're more
acceptable to yourself?
Yes, you're taking all these traits that are acceptable to you. And
why are they acceptable to you?
Because they make you feel good and you know that's the right thing to do. For example, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be, for example, say you see somebody be bullied. You see somebody getting beat up and you know you should do something, but you're afraid of standing up because of what people might think of you. You're afraid of what might happen to you if this bully decides to beat you up too. These are external factors that can play a big role into how you do something. But you don't have to listen to the external factors. I'm saying inside yourself, if you're comfortable with yourself, you know your self-worth, and you know you're supposed to, hey, stand up for this dude, then you're going to go and do it. Regardless of whatever people out in the outside world says.
Why would you do that? Why would you stand up to him?
Because those are your values, right?
And how did you get those values?
And I already told you, because of the external things that you pick.
No, you said you don't have to listen to the external world, so you don't have to stand up to the bully. You could accept the external things and then just sit there and be accepted by the tribe, or you could do what you know is morally correct and stand up for the kid. But why would you do that?
Because of some of those external values.
No, I think this is just one of those things we're going to disagree on. I think that, and this isn't to attack you, I think that you have this ideal that you're your own individual person and nothing has shaped you. You're just James, right? And I'm here to tell you, or voice my opinion on the matter, to say that everything that you do, because you're one of the people that would stand up to the bully, right?
Yep.
Because were you bullied?
Not really.
Why would you do it? Where did you learn that moral from?
Who knows?
It had to be somewhere. You just didn't pull it out of your butt.
It had to be somewhere. You're right.
It had to be somewhere. So it had to be an external factor.
And I'm telling you, I agree with you in that aspect, right? For example, with the bullying example, it doesn't matter what you do with the bully situation. It's an external factor regardless. I agree with you with that. Whether you choose to pick some values from the external part, right? External factors, variables, whatever you want, what have you, say you decide to be like everybody else and not stand up to the bully because you're not used to it. You're not in your comfort zone. Or you can stand up to the bully because you're not in your comfort zone, but you know it's something you want to do. Regardless, it is still in your self that makes you want to do it. It's you being comfortable with yourself that makes you want to do it. You're so comfortable, you're so sure of yourself that if you deviate from who you are as a person, you would not be able to safely live with yourself. Comfortably live with yourself, knowing that it's a regret. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you're saying. I disagree.
Explain.
I have. I think this is just something we're just going to disagree on, man. I think that you want to believe, and this goes back into the philosophy that there's good and evil, when there's not really either or. However, right, you not being able to live with yourself because you let something happen that you knew was incorrect, right? That is still something that was created for you. You still, at some age or another, said, okay, I can live with myself if I do not stand up to the bully, or I cannot live with myself if I do not stand up to this bully. That was something that was created. It was created. You didn't see anybody jumping in the Roman Colosseum and helping the people that were getting slaughtered or fighting tigers or whatever they were fighting, right? Because it just didn't happen, right? That was something that was okay by them. That was something that was normal to them. So regardless of if it's the normal or if it's the abnormal, it is created when you are born up until this point in age. All external factors. There's no other solution unless you want to believe that you're the star of your own movie and that you're special and that you built your own morals. And I just disagree with that. I think that every single moral that you have, or that anybody has something to do with society and how society has shaped you. I don't think that we're special. I don't think that we have some new way of innovating or thinking that is like, okay, I'm not going to be like everyone else. I'm going to stand up, and that makes you somebody. But it doesn't. That just makes you just like everybody else. Because you were still influenced to make that decision based on how you were raised, based on the way society shaped you. Maybe you were bullied in school and that's why you decided to stand up to the bully. Or maybe the kid that is getting bullied was one of your friends, so you stood up to the bully because you knew it was the right thing to do. Right? It goes into the philosophy we brought up earlier. There's no good or bad. There just is. And I think what he's saying with that is that it's whatever the culture, whatever the society shapes it to be in that present time. There's no, in my opinion, I don't see how you don't see it, but I respect how you view it. I want you to know that I do understand what you're saying. I just disagree with it.
All right, let me ask you this. How do you define your self-worth?
By what society deems.
By what society deems.
Yeah. Society's completely sculpted who I am today.
And what I'm trying to say is, yes, society, 100%, whether you were raised by wolves or in human society, wherever you are, will shape you to who you are.
And to do the things you do.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. But you're not seeing my point. We are not on the same page as the thing.
Explain.
It all comes down to comfortability and what you hold yourself, what values and what you hold to yourself dear. Okay? Bear with me here. Yes, everything is externally affecting you to shape you into who you are. But say you want to do one project or this one thing, right? We'll just call it Project A. Say you want to do Project A, but the majority of the people are doing Project B. And if you don't do Project A, you're not going to feel good about yourself, or you're not going to get that self-satisfaction out of yourself. But you choose to go with B because you want to be comfortable and you don't want to be put in that uncomfortable phase. Now, whether it's actually pursuing something or being extremely comfortable with yourself, I seriously do think that you being comfortable with yourself and accepting you for who you are, whether even if you wanted to pursue outside goals, right? That is not normal to everybody else. If you're comfortable being with whatever and doing whatever you want to do, then that should be fine. If you're genuinely seeing that self-worth, your self-worth, honestly, is probably what you make of it. It's what you make of it. You, as the individual, make of it. I honestly think we're just not on the same page, man.
I promise you I'm on your same page. I'm on the same page. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. You're saying whatever you feel deeply inside makes you feel good, you should be able to do it and feel good about it.
Yeah, and as long as these other external factors are not dictating you and pushing you to do this one thing, and you feel obligated to do it, and you're doing it just because it makes you happy and you're getting that self-worth, fulfilling whatever you want to pursue in your life, then that's like self-worth.
Okay.
That's enough self-worth.
This is where I think we're misinterpreting. I think that you're thinking very small picture. I think you're thinking of it circumstantial. As an individual, you should be able to do what you want and make you feel good and feel comfortable doing it without the outside world telling you, hey, this is what's right. Or this is what you should do to be accepted.
Sure.
That's very small thinking. And I'll tell you why. Because you have to think, what is driving that kid to do Project A instead of Project B?
And that right there is why we are not on the same page. I know exactly what you're talking about. I really do. You're talking about these external factors affecting that one person. Okay, but I'm talking about after. What happens after the external factors affects that one person? What are they going to do with those factors that they choose to collect and adopt into their lives and make that individual themselves? That's the difference between what we're talking about right now. Because I already understand that you're talking about all these factors affecting any individual and making them into a specific person. But if all these external factors is making that individual person into a person that they don't like, that is not their self-worth. But if they decide to take other external factors and make themselves into who they want to be, then that is self-worth.
Right, but what I'm saying is that everything leading up to that decision
Yes.
was external based.
And
That means anything that comes after it was external based. Regardless of which way you want to look at it, right? The reason he made the decision he made at that time to have self-worth and say, I'm going to do this, even though everyone else is doing this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the other guy. Everything leading up to that point was external.
And I agree with that.
Everything that comes after that is still external.
It's somewhat external, but now at that point, it's going to switch over to internal. Because right after you decide
You might have the feeling, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you might have the feeling of perception that you did it for you. And that very well could be the case. Because it gave you that feeling. It gave you that dopamine or that serotonin release that said, I did what was right. Or I did what I felt I needed to do to earn my self-worth. Right? Still does not take away from the fact that the entire reason he made that decision was external based. And every decision he's going to make after that is going to be external based. He goes through this thing, this system in his head where he says, you know what? I'm going to do this because it makes me feel this way. The only reason it makes you feel that way is because you decide you're the one who decided that you weren't going to fit into the crowd. The reason you didn't fit in, the reason that you decided not to fit in with the crowd was external based. Whether it would be your upbringing, whether that be the way you were raised, the morals that were taught to you, your ethics, all of that. That was taught. That's all taught stuff. We only have very few primal instincts, and then everything else is taught. Everything else is taught. So if you were brought up and your family was always like the ones that were saying, you know what, no matter what anybody tells you, you can be anything you want to be and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That was something that was taught, which is what made him make that decision in the first place. So every decision that he makes, yes, he can believe it comes from himself, but it really doesn't. It just gives him the feeling of it.
I still disagree, man.
And I think that's fine.
Yeah,
you know?
and I think, honestly, guys, this is something that Josiah and myself, we're just going to disagree on, and then we'll both put our own perspectives out there, our conclusion, if you will. And then down in the comments, just let us know who you agree with.
Or your own personal opinion. Again, you don't have to agree with James or me. You could just totally have your own other formulated opinion, and we would love to hear it because we love talks like this. This is why our episodes last, you guys don't see it, but it goes on for about an hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Honestly.
And then we edit it down. But that's just because we just talk. And so we have to, figure out what to keep and what not to keep. But
yeah. So I'm going to tell... Actually, you know what? Josiah, you go first.
So the question is, for today's episode, how do people define their own self-worth? Simple answer is that I believe that self-worth is a almost illusion that is taught to us and that we choose to believe in. That way we can achieve specific things and then feel amazing about it. I think, however, that all of those things that that person is defining their self-worth from was external, thus taking away the self, i.e. ending in just worth. Acceptance from whoever, or acceptance within himself. But all of that was taught. If the person has acceptance within himself, it's only because he was taught that this is what makes you have self-worth. James?
All right. I kind of agree with Josiah in the terms of if you take away self and if it's just worth, it's your worth compared to the outside world. But your self-worth is yourself. And I think that's the big difference. Now, to wrap it up, yes, external factors will create you as a person, no matter what. It will create you into believing in certain things, seeing things a certain way. You'll perceive and you'll see things, and then you'll develop your own inner thoughts, your own morals, your own ethics, your own person, right? Now, right after you shape yourself, it's you being extremely comfortable and confident within yourself that makes you worthy, that makes you become self-worthy. Josiah thinks it's external, external, external all around. But I think it's external at first, but then it comes from internal. Because if somebody's telling you to do something, even though you don't want to do it, then obviously it's not worth doing. But if you want to do it because you want to do it, then I think that makes all the difference.
Well said, James. Well, guys, to wrap it up, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow us on social media. If you like the episode, please share it. It gets the word out there a lot quicker. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for next week because you guys will not want to miss it. James, closing words?
Take it easy, guys. Peace.